Tonight, I'm here to talk to all of you about a topic that's probably going to make each and every person sitting here feel very uncomfortable. And I will be the first to admit that I too feel incredibly uncomfortable talking about this. But I feel the need to, just because of the fact that this is a topic that we, as human beings, have chosen to selectively ignore for too long. So here it goes. How many people in here think that they have an idea of what sexual assault is? Raise your hands. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 scenarios, and I want you to raise your hand if you think that the scenario qualifies as rape. Scenario 1. A woman is walking down a dark, deserted alleyway at 2:15 in the morning. She left the nightclub early, and she's walking by herself when out of the shadows emerges a large male figure. She notices, she picks up her pace, but the man following her is fast. She breaks out into a full sprint, but her heel gets caught in the cobblestones and she falls to the ground. The man who's been following her approaches her, jumps on top of her, and has sex with her against her will. Who here sees this as rape? Okay. Scenario number 2. It's obvious that the woman at the bar has had a lot to drink, and a man walking by notices her. He goes over to her, talks to her, buys her a few more drinks until she says she's ready to head home. He knows that her judgment is impaired, but he asks her if she wants to go back to his apartment, and she says yes. The two of them go back to the man's apartment, and the next morning, when she wakes up, the woman has very little recollection of what actually happened. All that she knows is that she's in a stranger's bed. Who here sees this as rape? Okay. Scenario number 3. As soon as she gets home from her part-time job, exhausted, a woman begins to write an end-of-the-term paper for one of her university courses. Her boyfriend gets home shortly after, and he asks her if she wants to have sex. She says no. She has a deadline to meet. She needs to finish her paper before midnight. But her boyfriend reminds her that it is her job, as his girlfriend, to satisfy him when he wants her to, and that if she's unwilling to or unable to do this, he can easily find somebody else to sleep with. So fearing for the stability of her relationship, she closes her laptop, and out of obligation, she has sex with her boyfriend. Who here sees this as rape? Many men and women globally have a misinterpretation of sexual assault. Rape is defined as any sexual interaction that occurs without the mutual consent of all people involved. Mutual consent cannot be given if someone is under the influence of alcohol and or other substances, or if somebody is underage. And most importantly, rape is not only between strangers. In fact, it's actually much, much more common amongst acquaintances, in families, in relationships, and even in marriage. All 3 of these scenarios are examples of rape, even though only the first one matches our contemporary perception of the word. My story is a combination of pieces from all 3 of these scenarios. In March of 2011, my virginity was taken from me by a man who raped me. There was a lot of alcohol involved, and I had never been drunk before. I was only 16 years old. When the man I was with asked me if I wanted to have sex with him, this incredibly drunk 16-year-old girl said yes. But I cannot tell you how many times I've wished that I could take that all back and that I could save myself for somebody who I know and trust and love. Not to have it taken away by someone who gave me more alcohol than my body could handle. I was 16. He was 21. I thought that since I had shared my body with this man, that meant I needed to become his girlfriend, and so I did shortly after. He constantly threatened to leave me, constantly threatened to have sex with somebody else if I wouldn't. And so I did, every time. Until December 23rd, 2011, which was the night that I said no. He had asked if we could have sex without a condom, and he promised to buy me an emergency contraceptive the next morning. But I said no because I wasn't comfortable with that. But no wasn't the answer that he was looking for. He took me into the public restroom, and he took me into the handicap stall, and he held down my arms and my legs so that I couldn't move. And I couldn't get him off of me because he was so much bigger and so much stronger, and even though I tried, it didn't work. And as I was asking for him to stop and crying and telling him to stop, his response to me was that since he had already started, he would have to buy the contraceptive anyway, so I might as well let him finish and get his $50 worth. In fact, this started happening so frequently that he told me to start taking birth control so that he wouldn't have to pay $50 for every time that he chose to behave in this way. And so I did. I took birth control behind my mother's back, and I lied to everybody about my relationship with this man because I was so afraid to open up. In fall of 2012, when I finally moved away for university, the distance between my hometown and the college I was studying at was enough to break off the relationship. But it almost didn't matter because shortly after that, I found myself in 2 more verbally, physically, and emotionally abusive relationships. Because you see, once I had gotten used to being treated like dirt, that was all that I knew, and I started treating myself that way. I thought that I deserved that. So how did I get out? How did I break this cycle of self-hatred that I found myself stuck in? Well, first, I sought counseling. It was the counselor who let me know that I was a victim and a survivor of rape. She was also the one who let me know that there are ways to get out of relationships like this. But counseling could only take me so far. The remaining struggle that I had was in my head. I can shut everybody else in the world out except for my own mind. It follows me wherever I go. And so then I had an epiphany. I realized that I was torturing myself, reliving my own assault over and over again in my head. And I was hurting myself by blaming the assaults on my own inadequacies as a person. I came to realize that what's happened has happened, and nothing that I do now can change what happened to me when I was 16 years old. But what I can do is I can change how I perceive my past, and I can take a terrible event and I can transform it into a beautiful stepping stone in my life, giving me the chance to grow and to prosper. So I was only able to break this cycle of self-hatred once I assumed responsibility for myself and for my own actions. I transformed self-blame into self-responsibility. So I'm asking all of you here today, when you think about your past, is there a moment where you say, oh my gosh, that was so unfair? Why did that happen? Poor me. Because if there is, then good. Hold on to that moment because we're going to learn from that tonight. Tonight, it's time for the death of poor you and poor me. It's time to let go of that part of us that likes to suffer, that likes to be a martyr in a cruel and uncaring world. It's time to let go of our self-hatred, our self-blame, and our regrets. We all know that pointing the finger of blame at somebody else is the easiest way out of any situation. But that didn't get me very far in 4 years of pointing the finger at somebody else. In fact, walking down this road it's not an easy one to walk down. But 4 years of suffering was enough for me. So I'm asking all of you here today, how long have you suffered? Have you suffered long enough to shift your paradigm from being outward to being inward? What I did was, instead of pointing the finger of blame outward, I shifted it and I redirected it to be inward. So not blaming myself, but taking responsibility for myself and for my own life. And in doing this, I took the power back from a man who raped me 4 years ago, and I put it back into my own hands. So by shifting my paradigm from being outward to being inward, I finally had back everything that he had taken from me before. So no matter what you've been through, open up, talk to somebody about it, and take a risk. Because today I'm taking a huge risk by standing in front of all of you and by speaking publicly about my past. But it feels amazing being vulnerable just because I'm tired of hiding all of this in my past. And I'm tired of pretending like it didn't happen. Because guess what? It did. But I've come to realize that I'm not just a statistic. I'm a person. And so is everybody sitting here today. We're all just people. So don't let your past define who you are today. Don't let any event in your past be an embarrassment. Let it be a chance and an opportunity to grow. Be proud of it, not ashamed, because it taught you something. So we can work together and we can shift our focus from being outward to being inward. We can say that no longer does our past dictate who we are as people today. We can move on.